Come on, buddy, get in the car.
He's not going anywhere, Adrian.
Rain drummed steadily against the windows of the Maple Creek Animal Rescue Center. Saturday mornings were usually busy. Families wandered through the kennels. Children pointed excitedly at puppies tumbling over each other. Volunteers smiled. Applications were filled out. Tiny dogs almost always went home first. Then the front door opened. A tall man in a charcoal gray suit stepped inside, carrying nothing but a black umbrella and the exhausted expression of someone who had forgotten what weekends were supposed to feel like. Several volunteers exchanged knowing smiles. "A businessman," one whispered. "He'll definitely want a puppy." "They always do." The man thanked the receptionist quietly, accepted a visitor badge, and began walking past every kennel. Golden retriever puppies, a pair of energetic beagles, a playful husky who immediately rolled onto its back for attention. He smiled politely at all of them, but he didn't stop. Near the end of the hallway sat the oldest dog in the shelter, Buddy, 12 years old, gray around the muzzle, one cloudy eye, slow when he walked, even slower when he trusted someone enough to stand. Above his kennel hung a faded card. Last adoption inquiry, 487 days ago. The man stood there for several silent seconds. Buddy lifted his head. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Finally, the man smiled. "I think he's waited long enough." The entire hallway fell quiet. His name was Adrian Brooks, 34, founder and CEO of Brooks Living, one of the fastest-growing luxury furniture companies on the West Coast. People described him as brilliant, focused, impossible to distract. He negotiated million-dollar contracts before breakfast, remembered every employee's sales numbers, forgot his own birthday twice. Since his father passed away 18 months earlier, Adrian had buried himself inside work with frightening efficiency. His house was enormous. His calendar was full. His dining table could seat 12 people. Most nights, only one chair was used. He could buy almost anything, except someone waiting for him to come home. His assistant had finally said, "Sir, either adopt a dog or start talking to your houseplants." Adrian had considered the plants, then decided the plants deserved better conversation. At the opposite end of the shelter, Emma Collins was organizing blankets for the senior dogs. 27 years old, elementary school art teacher during the week, volunteer every Saturday for the last 3 years. She had become famous among the dogs for talking to them exactly the way she spoke to her students. Sharing is caring. No biting. We use our inside barks. Buddy had been her favorite, almost from the beginning. Not because he was the cutest, because no one else ever chose him. For 3 years, she had walked him, brushed him, celebrated every birthday the shelter guest he might have had, and whispered the same promise before leaving each weekend. One day, she'd tell him, scratching behind his ears, "Someone wonderful is going to find you." Buddy always wagged his tail politely, as if he appreciated the optimism, even if he no longer believed it himself. So when Emma heard someone asking about Buddy's adoption paperwork, she nearly dropped an entire basket of tennis balls. She hurried toward the office. Through the glass window, she saw Adrian calmly signing forms. She frowned. He was wearing an expensive watch that probably cost more than her car. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect smile. Emma had seen people like this before. They came to shelters after difficult weeks, took photos with rescue dogs, posted captions about compassion, then quietly returned the animals a month later because chewing furniture was apparently unexpected. She looked at Buddy, then back at Adrian. "I hope you're different," she whispered. Buddy sneezed. Emma chose to believe that meant agreement. An hour later, adoption papers were complete. Buddy's old blanket, medication schedule, favorite treats, emergency numbers, everything was packed neatly into one reusable bag. There was only one problem. Buddy refused to get into Adrian's SUV. He planted all 4 paws firmly on the ground. Adrian gently tugged the leash. Nothing. Buddy looked away dramatically. Emma folded her arms, trying very hard not to smile. "He's testing you." Adrian looked at the stubborn dog. "Is that what's happening?" "Mm-hmm. How long does the test last?" Emma pretended to think. "Depends. On what?" "Whether he decides you're trustworthy." Adrian nodded seriously. "And how will I know if I've passed?" Before Emma could answer, Buddy calmly lifted one back leg and peed directly onto Adrian's polished leather shoe. Silence. A volunteer gasped. Someone near the reception desk turned away to hide a laugh. Emma lasted exactly 3 seconds, then doubled over laughing so hard she had to grab the fence for support. I'm so sorry. She couldn't even finish the sentence. Tears filled her eyes from laughing. Adrian looked down at his ruined shoe, then at Buddy, then back at Emma. So, he said with complete seriousness, I assume I failed. Emma laughed even harder. Buddy finally wagged his tail, very slightly. Emma wiped her eyes. Actually, I think that means he likes you. Adrian looked unconvinced. This is how he shows affection? Senior dogs are complicated. So I've been told. For reasons Adrian couldn't explain, he started laughing too. It wasn't loud, it wasn't elegant, but it was real, and according to the shelter manager, it was the first time Buddy had wagged his tail for a stranger before leaving the building. As Adrian drove away with Buddy sleeping quietly in the back seat, Emma stood beneath the shelter awning watching the SUV disappear into the rainy afternoon. Everyone around her looked delighted. She wanted to be. She truly did. But something refused to settle inside her. 3 years. She had seen too many senior dogs returned, too many promises broken, too many lonely eyes waiting by shelter doors for owners who never came back. She looked at Buddy's now empty kennel, then quietly folded the old blanket she had forgotten to pack. No, she murmured to herself. I'm not being negative. I'm being careful. If Adrian Brooks truly intended to give Buddy the home he deserved, Emma would be the happiest volunteer in Seattle. But if he was just another wealthy man chasing the feeling of doing something noble, she intended to find out before Buddy's heart had to break again. 3 days, she decided. She would secretly stop by his house in 3 days. Not to check on Adrian, to make sure Buddy was really home, and really loved. 3 days later, Emma Collins stood outside Adrian Brooks's house, with Buddy's forgotten blanket tucked under one arm, and a very rehearsed excuse ready in her head. She was not spying. She was delivering property, important property, emotional property, dog property. The house was exactly what she expected from a wealthy furniture CEO. Large, modern, glass-fronted, tastefully lit, and so clean from the outside, it looked like nobody had ever dropped cereal on the floor inside. Emma rang the doorbell once. Nothing. She rang again. A muffled crash came from somewhere inside. Then a man's voice shouted, "Please don't eat that. That costs more than my first car." Emma's eyebrows lifted. The door opened 10 seconds later. Adrian stood there wearing dark slacks, a wrinkled white shirt, and the expression of a man negotiating with fate and losing badly. His hair was no longer perfect. One sleeve was rolled up. The other looked like it had given up halfway. Behind him, Buddy trotted proudly across the foyer, carrying what appeared to be a remote control in his mouth. Emma looked at Adrian. Adrian looked at Buddy. Buddy dropped the remote. Only half of it remained. Emma pressed her lips together. I brought his blanket. Adrian glanced at the blanket, as if it might contain instructions from a wiser civilization. Excellent. Is this a bad time? No. This is actually one of our calmer moments. A second crash came from the living room. Adrian closed his eyes. That was probably the report. The report? Quarterly projections. Printed. Bound. Apparently delicious. Emma stepped inside. The house was not spotless anymore. It was beautiful, yes, but also clearly under occupation. One Italian leather shoe lay in the hallway with the heel chewed. A stack of papers had been scattered under the coffee table. A decorative pillow had been dragged halfway across the floor. Buddy's new bed sat untouched beside the fireplace, while Buddy himself had chosen to nap on Adrian's suit jacket. Emma looked around slowly, then smiled. Buddy looks healthy. Adrian followed her gaze to the chaos. I'm glad one of us does. Buddy wagged his tail and leaned against Emma's knees. She knelt to rub his ears. Hi, old man. Are you terrorizing the rich? Adrian cleared his throat. I prefer the term restructuring. Emma laughed before she could stop herself. Adrian looked pleased by that. Too pleased. She immediately reminded herself she was here for the dog. Only the dog. Adrian had tried everything. He had bought the most expensive orthopedic dog bed available, 3 kinds of senior dog food, supplements recommended by the shelter, a raincoat Buddy refused to wear, and a book titled How to Talk to Dogs. Emma found the book open on the kitchen counter. Buddy was asleep under it. Not beside it, under it. The book had apparently fallen over him, and Buddy had decided not to care. Emma picked it up carefully. Adrian looked embarrassed. Chapter 4 said to use calm vocal tones. Did it work? He left the room. Maybe your calm vocal tone sounds like a board meeting. That is possible. Emma flipped the book shut. Dogs don't need executive communication. What do they need? She looked down at Buddy, who had now rolled onto his back with one cloudy eye half open. Routine, patience, snacks, walks, and someone who doesn't panic every time they do something dog-like. Adrian glanced at the ruined remote. He ate the volume button. Maybe he thought your house was too quiet. That landed more softly than Emma intended. Adrian's expression shifted for just a second. Then Buddy sneezed. The moment broke. Emma spent the next hour teaching Adrian basic senior dog survival. She showed him how to measure Buddy's medication, where to place rugs so Buddy's aging legs would not slip, how to use a harness without accidentally creating what Adrian called a dog-shaped puzzle, and how to stop buying toys designed for puppies with the jaw strength of tiny wolves. Buddy accepted the attention like a retired king. When Emma demonstrated how to brush him, Adrian watched with an intensity that made her blush. You're staring. I'm learning. You're staring like there's going to be a quiz. With Buddy, there is always a quiz. She smiled. And you are currently passing. Buddy immediately yawned in Adrian's direction. Adrian nodded. High praise. The next lesson was walking. Adrian expected Buddy to move slowly. Buddy did, mostly, until he saw a squirrel. For approximately 8 seconds, the 12-year-old dog with one cloudy eye and a suspicious hip became a furry missile. Adrian lurched forward. Emma grabbed his arm. Buddy reached the end of the leash and stopped, triumphant, as the squirrel escaped up a tree. Adrian straightened his coat. Emma looked at him. You okay? I have been pulled less aggressively by hostile investors. Did the investors also bark at squirrels? Only metaphorically. She laughed again, and Adrian found himself wanting to earn that sound on purpose. They walked through the quiet neighborhood while Buddy sniffed every leaf, as if conducting legal discovery. Emma talked about her students, about how one child had painted a purple sun because yellow was too predictable, about how Buddy used to refuse walks on rainy shelter days unless she promised him 2 treats. Adrian listened, actually listened, not the way he listened in meetings while preparing his next answer, the way a person listens when something feels unexpectedly important. By the time they returned, Buddy was exhausted and happy. Adrian was exhausted and slightly muddy. Emma looked radiant. He noticed that too. Bathing Buddy was less peaceful. Buddy tolerated warm water. He tolerated shampoo. He did not tolerate the dryer. The moment Adrian turned it on, Buddy shook his entire body with heroic commitment. Water flew across the bathroom walls, the mirror, Adrian's shirt, and Emma's face. For a second, they stood frozen. Then Emma wiped water from her eyelashes and whispered, "He has chosen violence." Adrian looked down at his soaked shirt. "I respect the strategy." Buddy wagged his tail. Emma started laughing. Adrian joined her. The bathroom echoed with it, bright and ridiculous, while Buddy looked deeply satisfied with his work. Later, after Buddy had been dried with 3 towels and bribed with 2 treats, he fell asleep in the living room between them. Emma sat on the rug because Buddy had placed his head on her ankle. Adrian sat on the floor too, though his couch was 6 feet away and objectively more comfortable. Emma noticed, "You know you can sit on furniture. You literally sell it." Adrian looked at Buddy. "I'm trapped. He's 12. Move gently. I don't want to wake him." Emma's smile softened. There it was, the thing she had come to check for. Not the expensive food, not the giant house, not the bed Buddy refused to use. Care. Awkward, unpolished, overwhelmed care. Maybe Adrian Brooks was not performing kindness. Maybe he was learning it. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma kept visiting. At first, always with excuses. She had forgotten Buddy's favorite brush, then his chew toy, then a printout about senior dog joints, then a bag of treats Buddy specifically requested, which Adrian accepted as if the dog had filed paperwork. Soon the excuses became unnecessary. Buddy expected her. Adrian expected her. The house expected her. In the strange way empty houses begin to warm around familiar footsteps. But one Friday night, Emma stopped by later than usual and found the lights still blazing in Adrian's office. It was nearly 2 in the morning. Buddy sat outside the closed door, not sleeping, just waiting. Emma stood in the hallway, watching the old dog's tired head rest against the wood. Inside, Adrian's voice murmured through a conference call. Numbers, deadlines, Singapore, margins, the old language of loneliness disguised as importance. Emma crouched beside Buddy and touched his back. He leaned into her hand without taking his eyes off the door. When Adrian finally came out, he stopped short. "Emma?" She stood slowly. "Do you know he sits here every night?" Adrian looked down at Buddy. Guilt crossed his face. "I thought he slept." "He waits." The hallway went quiet. Adrian loosened his tie, suddenly looking less like a CEO and more like the lonely man she had suspected lived underneath. "I'm trying," he said. "I know. I bought everything he needs." Emma shook her head gently. "Buddy doesn't need a perfect house." Adrian looked at her. Her voice softened. "He needs his person." The words landed deeper than either of them expected. Adrian looked down as Buddy pressed his gray muzzle against his leg. For years, Adrian had measured care by what he could provide. Better rooms, better furniture, better things. But Buddy had not been waiting outside his office for a better bed. He had been waiting for him. Adrian knelt and slipped both arms around the old dog. Buddy sighed, tired and content. Emma watched them from the hallway, her heart tightening in a way that scared her, because she had come to make sure Buddy was loved. She had not planned to start worrying whether Adrian was loved too. Buddy began slowing down near the end of summer. At first it was small enough to pretend it was nothing. He took longer getting up from his bed. He paused halfway through walks and looked back at the house, as if negotiating with his own legs. He slept deeper, ate slower, chased fewer squirrels with less conviction and more commentary. Adrian noticed everything. So did Emma. The veterinarian called it normal aging, the kind of decline that came quietly and politely, like an unwanted guest who still wiped its shoes before entering. Buddy had arthritis, a weak heart, cloudy vision, and the stubborn spirit of a dog who still believed every mail truck deserved suspicion. Adrian changed his schedule. At first he only moved meetings to mornings. Then he began working from home 2 days a week, then 3. His assistant sent one email that read, "Are you taking an actual lunch break, or has your identity been stolen?" Adrian replied, "Buddy has requested executive restructuring." Emma laughed for almost a full minute when he showed her. "You're learning dog language." "I'm fluent now. You said sit yesterday, and Buddy walked into another room. He was making a strategic decision. He ignored you, with confidence." Buddy, resting on the rug, thumped his tail once as if agreeing. Adrian no longer worked until 2 in the morning. Not every night. Not anymore. Sometimes he closed his laptop at 7, looked at Buddy, and said, "Walk?" Buddy would lift his head slowly, dramatically, as if doing Adrian a tremendous favor. Emma would arrive with treats in one pocket and art supplies in the other, because apparently senior dogs needed creative enrichment, which mostly meant Buddy watching her draw while Adrian tried not to stare at her hands. The house changed around them, not through furniture, through routine, a leash by the door, a water bowl in the living room, Emma's laugh in the kitchen, Adrian's coat left over a chair instead of hung perfectly in the closet, Buddy's gray hair on everything expensive. For the first time in years, Adrian stopped caring whether the house looked flawless. It finally looked lived in. One Saturday, Emma suggested taking Buddy to Willow Lake Park. "He loves the ducks," she said. Adrian looked at Buddy, who was asleep with his tongue slightly out. "He looks emotionally neutral about ducks. He pretends not to care. Like someone else I know. I am openly passionate about many things. Such as efficient drawer handles." Emma stared at him. "That is the saddest answer I've ever heard. It's my industry. It's a cry for help." They packed a picnic, sandwiches, fruit, lemonade, and a small container of Buddy-approved chicken pieces. Adrian carried the blanket. Emma carried the food. Buddy carried nothing and acted like management. At the lake, Buddy came alive. He sniffed the grass, inspected a tree, ignored a golden retriever half his age, and stared at the ducks with quiet judgment. Then one duck flapped too close to the shore. Buddy lunged. Adrian held the leash. Emma grabbed Adrian's arm. For 2 full seconds, the 3 of them formed an extremely unstable chain of poor decision-making. Then Buddy changed direction. Adrian slipped. Emma yelped, and all 3 of them went sideways into the shallow edge of the lake. Cold water splashed everywhere. The ducks scattered. Buddy stood knee-deep, perfectly calm, looking delighted. Adrian sat in the water in stunned silence. Emma surfaced beside him, hair dripping, one leaf stuck to her cheek. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma looked at Buddy and said, "He planned this." Adrian wiped water from his face. "He absolutely planned this." Buddy wagged his tail. Emma began laughing first. Adrian followed, helplessly, until they were both sitting in lake water like idiots, while an elderly couple on the walking path applauded politely. Emma bowed from the water. Adrian muttered, "Please don't encourage her." "You need encouragement," she said. "I need dry socks. You need both." Later, wrapped in the picnic blanket and still damp, they sat beneath an oak tree while Buddy dozed between them, proud and exhausted from his act of aquatic terrorism. The sun sank low over the lake, turning everything gold. Emma leaned back on her hands. "He looks happy." Adrian looked at Buddy, then at Emma. "He does." A quiet settled over them. Not awkward, not empty. The kind of quiet that felt like a room with windows open. Emma's shoulder brushed his. Neither moved away. Adrian had known attraction before. He had known polished dates, impressive women, careful conversations over wine. This was different. Emma had seen his house destroyed, his shoes ruined, his dog parenting failures, his loneliness, his terrible attempts at calm vocal tones. And somehow, she kept coming back. Not because he was wealthy, not because he was impressive, because she cared about an old dog who had waited too long. And maybe, without meaning to, she had started caring about the man who adopted him. Adrian looked down at Buddy sleeping between them like a furry referee. He realized, with startling clarity, that he loved Emma. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet way people begin loving the person who makes home feel less like a place and more like breathing. As twilight deepened, Emma reached into the picnic basket and pulled out Buddy's medication. She gave it to him gently, tucked inside a piece of chicken. Buddy accepted it from her fingers with complete trust. Adrian watched. "You always know exactly what he needs." Emma smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "I had a lot of practice." "With shelter dogs?" "With him." Adrian waited. Emma rubbed Buddy's ears, her thumb moving slowly through the gray fur. "I almost adopted him once." Adrian's expression changed. "When?" "2 years ago. Then again last year." She kept her eyes on Buddy. "I filled out the form both times. I even bought a leash once. It was blue. Completely ridiculous because I couldn't afford the adoption fee, the medication, the vet bills, any of it." Her voice stayed steady, but just barely. "I was sharing an apartment with 2 other teachers. Student loans, car repairs, my mom's medical bills for a while. Every time I added the numbers, love wasn't enough." Adrian said nothing. Emma swallowed. "So I did the only thing I could do. I came every Saturday. I walked him, brushed him, celebrated fake birthdays, told him someone wonderful would find him." She finally looked at Adrian. "And then you did." Adrian felt something twist inside his chest. All this time, he had thought Emma visited because she distrusted him, and she had, partly, but the deeper truth was far more painful. She had loved Buddy for 3 years without ever being able to take him home. She had kept showing up for a dog who could never be hers. Adrian looked down at Buddy, sleeping peacefully between them, and then back at Emma. "I didn't know. I didn't want you to feel guilty." "Emma, no," she smiled gently. "You gave him what I couldn't. I'm grateful for that." The humility in her voice undid him. Adrian had spent his life buying solutions. Emma had spent 3 years giving love where she could not afford possession. For the first time, Adrian understood that some people did not love by keeping. They loved by returning, week after week, even when it hurt. He reached across Buddy and gently took her hand. Emma looked down at their joined fingers, then at him. Neither spoke. Buddy sighed between them, as if he had been waiting for the humans to finally catch up. By October, Buddy's good days became smaller, not gone, just smaller. There were still mornings when he wagged his tail before Adrian even opened his eyes. Still afternoons, when he insisted on inspecting the garden with the seriousness of a retired security officer. Still evenings when he pressed his gray muzzle against Emma's knee and looked at her as if asking why dinner was taking so long, when clearly he had been patient for at least 4 tragic minutes. But the stairs became harder. Walks became shorter. Some days, Buddy stopped at the end of the driveway and simply looked at the world instead of walking into it. Adrian bought ramps, softer beds, heated blankets, joint supplements, orthopedic mats, and one absurdly expensive dog stroller that Buddy refused to enter on principle. Emma found it in the hallway and stared. "You bought him a stroller?" Adrian crossed his arms. "It has suspension. He is not commuting through a mountain range. He deserves comfort. He is currently sleeping on your shoe." Adrian looked down. Buddy was, in fact, sleeping with his head on Adrian's ruined leather shoe. Emma smiled sadly. "I think he already chose comfort." The joke faded gently, because they both knew. The vet confirmed it on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Buddy's heart was weakening faster now. His body was tired. The medication could help, but not for long. "Weeks," the veterinarian said softly. "Maybe less." Adrian nodded like a man receiving business information. Emma saw the way his hand tightened around Buddy's leash. In the parking lot, Adrian stood beside the car, unable to open the door. Buddy leaned against his leg. Emma waited. Finally, Adrian whispered, "I only just got him." Emma's eyes filled. "I know. I thought there would be more time. There never feels like enough." Buddy looked up at them, tail moving slowly, as if the humans were being dramatic again, and he had tolerated enough of that already. So they gave him time differently. They stopped counting how much was left and started filling what remained. Adrian worked from home almost every day. Emma came after school with paint on her fingers and treats in her coat pocket. They made a list titled Buddy's Very Important Senior Dog Adventures, written by Emma in purple marker and corrected by Adrian in painfully neat handwriting. The list included eat scrambled eggs, nap in sunbeam, visit shelter friends, bark at mail truck, sit by lake, ignore expensive stroller, receive compliments from strangers, and taste whipped cream. Buddy completed each task with quiet dignity. Except the whipped cream, that he completed with chaos. He got cream on his nose, on Adrian's sleeve, and somehow on Emma's eyebrow. Adrian tried to wipe it away. Emma stood very still when his thumb brushed her face. For a second, the world held its breath. Buddy sneezed. The whipped cream landed on Adrian's shirt. Emma laughed through tears. Adrian looked down, then up at Buddy. Excellent timing. Buddy wagged his tail. Even near the end, he remained deeply committed to ruining romantic tension. On Buddy's last good afternoon, they took him back to Willow Lake. No swimming this time. No heroic duck pursuit. Just a blanket beneath the same oak tree, a basket of soft food, and the lake shining gold beneath a quiet sunset. Buddy lay between them, with his head on Emma's lap and his back against Adrian's leg. Emma ran her fingers through his fur. Adrian watched the sunset, but his hand stayed on Buddy's side, feeling each breath. "He brought you here," Adrian said. Emma looked at him. "To the lake?" "To me." She smiled gently. "I think he brought you to yourself first." Adrian swallowed. That was the thing about Emma. She said the true thing softly enough that it did not feel like judgment. Buddy sighed. Adrian looked down. "I don't know how to say goodbye to him." Emma's hand paused. "Then don't say it all at once." He turned to her. She continued, voice unsteady. "Say thank you. Say I love you. Say I'll miss you. Say all the pieces. Goodbye can come last." Adrian looked at Buddy for a long moment, then bent down and pressed his forehead gently against the old dog's head. "Thank you," he whispered. Emma looked away, but tears slipped down her cheeks anyway. That night, Buddy did not want to sleep in his bed. He stood in the living room, swaying slightly, then looked at the couch where Emma and Adrian sat side by side. Adrian understood first. He lowered himself to the rug. Emma followed. Buddy slowly moved between them and settled with his body touching both. The house was quiet. Only the soft tick of the clock, rain against the windows, and Buddy's breathing. Emma held one of his paws. Adrian kept a hand on his chest. At some point after midnight, Buddy lifted his head and looked at each of them. "Just tired." Adrian's voice broke. "Buddy." The old dog's tail moved once. Emma leaned close. "We're here." Buddy exhaled. His body softened, and peacefully, without pain, without panic, he was gone. For several seconds, neither Adrian nor Emma moved. The silence after him felt enormous. Then Adrian bent over Buddy and sobbed. The grief tore out of him like something that had been waiting much longer than the few months he had known this dog. Emma wrapped her arms around both of them and cried too. For Buddy. For the years he waited. For the short time they had. For the love that was still real even when it arrived late. Later, When morning had turned the windows pale, Emma gently removed Buddy's collar. Her fingers brushed something tucked behind the old tag. A tiny folded slip of paper, yellowed at the edges. She frowned. "I've never seen this." Adrian looked up, eyes red. Emma unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was from the shelter's intake form, likely written years ago by someone who had met Buddy on the first day he arrived. Only one line. "Needs someone who won't leave." Emma covered her mouth. Adrian stared at the note, then at Buddy, then broke all over again. He gathered the old dog into his arms, holding him as if love could still keep him warm. "I didn't leave," he whispered. I stayed, Buddy." Emma pressed her forehead to Adrian's shoulder, crying too hard to speak. Because Buddy had needed someone who would not leave, and in the end, he had found two. A woman who kept returning for 3 years when she could not take him home, and a man who finally learned that love was not something to buy, arrange, or schedule. It was something you stayed for, even when it hurt, especially then. 1 year later, Rain returned to Maple Creek Animal Rescue Center. Not heavy rain. Just the kind that softened sidewalks, blurred windows, and made old memories feel close enough to touch. Emma Collins arrived first. She still volunteered on Saturdays. She still talked to nervous dogs like they were students on the first day of school. She still paused, for half a second, whenever she passed Buddy's old kennel. But it did not hurt the same way anymore. Outside the shelter, beneath a small maple tree near the walking path, stood a simple wooden bench. Above it, a brass plate read, "Buddy's Tree." For the ones who waited, Adrian had paid for the bench. Emma had painted tiny paw prints along the side. Neither of them ever said it was theirs, but everyone knew. That afternoon, Adrian walked in wearing jeans, a dark coat, and no suit. The receptionist smiled. "Mr. Brooks." "Adrian," he corrected gently. Emma looked up from tying a bandana around an elderly terrier's neck. "You're late. 3 minutes." "Buddy would have judged you. He always judged me. He had excellent standards." Adrian smiled. The space between them had changed over the past year. They were not married. There had been no dramatic proposal, no grand declaration in front of friends, no neat label that made everyone else comfortable. They had simply stayed, through grief, through quiet dinners, through walks that felt strange without Buddy, through days when Emma cried in the grocery store because she saw his favorite treats, through nights when Adrian still looked toward the living room rug, expecting a gray muzzle to be there. They stayed, and somehow, staying had become its own kind of love. The shelter manager appeared with a clipboard. "We have someone I think you should meet." In the last kennel on the left sat an old dog named Rosie, 13 years old, slow, nearly deaf, white face, brown eyes that looked tired of hoping. Her adoption card said, "Last adoption inquiry, 392 days ago." Adrian stopped in front of her kennel. Emma stood beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Rosie lifted her head. Her tail moved once. Just once. Adrian exhaled softly. Emma looked at him. "You sure?" He glanced at her, then back at Rosie. "No." Emma smiled. "Good answer." The paperwork took less time than Buddy's had. Maybe because Adrian knew the questions now. Maybe because Emma had already packed treats, a blanket, and 3 different medications in a tote bag without admitting she had been prepared. When they walked Rosie toward the door, one of the younger volunteers laughed gently. "Another senior dog?" Adrian looked down at Rosie, then at Emma. A quiet smile crossed his face. "Someone taught me." He paused. "Old souls are worth waiting for." Emma's eyes softened. She did not answer. She only smiled. Outside, the rain had stopped. The shelter door opened. Rosie stepped carefully into the afternoon light. Adrian held one end of the leash. Emma held the other. They did not hold hands. They did not need to. Together, they walked past Buddy's tree, where yellow leaves drifted slowly onto the empty bench. For a moment, Emma looked back. So did Adrian. The bench was empty. But not lonely. Then Rosie tugged them forward. not far or fast. Just enough to remind them that love, even after loss, still knew the way home. And together, they kept walking. Maybe Buddy's greatest gift wasn't teaching Adrian how to care for an old dog. Maybe it was reminding two lonely people that love isn't measured by how long it lasts, but by how faithfully we choose to stay while we have the chance. I like to believe that every once in a while, life sends us a soul, sometimes with 2 legs, sometimes with 4, not to stay forever, but to quietly lead us toward the people we're meant to find. And perhaps that's why some goodbyes, as heartbreaking as they are, never really feel like endings. Now I'm curious, has an animal ever changed your life, or introduced you to someone you would have never met otherwise? I'd love to read your story in the comments. And if stories like this remind you that kindness, loyalty, and love still exist in the world, I hope you'll subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. There are many more journeys waiting for us, and perhaps the next one will find exactly when you need it most.